Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Tier List Tuesday. So, for this week, I wanted to return to something that I know and I can really talk about. Because last week, with that SpongeBob video, I felt that that was a little lackluster and I didn't really express my thoughts in the way that I normally do in these videos. So, I decided to return to something that I can, of course, talk about all day, One Piece, right? And for this week, we're going to be doing the islands of One Piece and specifically how much I would want to live on the islands. And I think I'm going to take an average of sort of before the Straw Hats came and after they came, right? I'm going to kind of just do like an aggregate because a lot of these islands change a lot, right? So I'm going to consider how bad they were. Maybe it would be like if you were a citizen before there, like you grew up there, and then the Straw Hats did what they did and whatever faction was involved did what they did and how it turned out after, right? So sort of just a total life experience of living on that island. And as usual, we have the normal tiers, S, A, B, C, D, and F. And I'm going to be considering things like, at the base level, how easy it would be to even survive, because some of these would be pretty tough. And access to resources, how good the government is, the governing body of the island, and, all those factors that you would expect, right? So let's get into it. And first off, we have Alabasta, which is the land of oases, as the dub narrator so charmingly calls it in the intro to that arc. And Alabasta is a nation that starts off as a very rough sort of place to be, because of the forced droughts by Crocodile, and you think that your king is like some horrible person and there's a civil war brewing. And with the amount of troops that were involved in that, I mean, it's a massive island, but with the amount of troops involved in that, you were probably going to be embroiled in it regardless, right? With that being said, though, after the Straw Hats come and sort everything out and weed out Crocodile is the problem, I think Alabasta becomes one of the best places to live, right? Because you have such a great government, such a benevolent government with Cobra and now Vivi. And it just seems like a great place to live after the fact, right? So it's kind of a weird split mixed bag. And I think for a split mixed bag, you got to go B tier, right? Because the early part of your life would have been really bad, depending on when you were born. But after the intervention, I think life, really starts to warm up. I mean, it's already hot, ha ha ha. But it really starts to get a lot better for you after the Straw Hats do their thing. So I think B tier is a good place for that. I would personally maybe put it in A tier, but for how bad it was beforehand, I can't put it in A tier. Let's put it in B tier. So maybe the funniest one on this whole tier list is Amazon Lily. And, obviously what I am, right? I am a man. So living on Amazon Lily should immediately put it into F tier. But with the general sort of, gender split in the world, right? I'm kind of at a loss for words. I feel like it goes one of two ways, right? If you're like me, you're not going to want to live there because you'll die instantly. But if you, are a woman, it might not be so bad because, well, you have to be strong, right? Or you don't have to be, but that's how you kind of rise through the society. They don't care about the strong or beautiful is their like catchphrase, right? But I think Amazon Lily, the thing is, Boa treats her people well too. Her lady citizens. I'm going to put it in C tier, and it really is just like a, if you're a guy, it's F tier. If you're a girl, it's A to S tier. So another good thing to consider that is if you are a woman, it's in the calm belt, which means that sort of marine intervention is like not going to be a thing, right? I mean, it obviously has been recently, but that's just because it's unprecedented times, right? And Blackbeard came, and that was just crazy, right? But in general, most of the time, the location of the island really prevents or discourages invaders, right? With all the Sea Kings. So I'm going to put Amazon Lily in C tier. Obviously, if you're a guy, it's going to be F tier. But I think all factors considered, Amazon Lily belongs in C tier. I think I said that right. So Arlong Park is just not where you want to be, right? Because it's one of two options. You're either a fishman on Arlong's crew, which is not good, right? You are a lowly band of bandits that have laid claim to the weakest sea in the world and are just harassing citizens and doing all sorts of horrible deeds, right? And I just think that that's not good, right? Or you are a subjugated member of one of the nearby villages, like Kokoyasi, and that is just hell on earth, right? You're forced to pay these exorbitantly high, tributes to Arlong, and all around it's just a really, really horrible place to live. I think that it is probably one of the worst places on this whole list, and for that reason, I'm going to put it in F tier. I think that you would rather find yourself in most of these places besides Arlong Park, over Arlong Park. Now, going to the complete opposite end of the spectrum is Baratier, right? And if you live on Baratier, it means one thing. You're a chef, right? And you're the fighting chefs of the Baratier. You're one of them. And that is a good life, right? It really is a good life. You know, it's a little rough around the edges, right? You kind of have to like fight some pirates sometimes, and you know, your coworkers aren't really the most straight and narrow either. But once again, there's a lot of camaraderie and there's a lot of just good vibes all the time. You know, you're just serving up food, and it just seems like such a simple life compared to many other characters in One Piece. And I could definitely see myself getting along well on the Baratier. Of course, Don Krieg's going to pull up eventually, and Luffy's going to deal with that, and the whole thing's going to go sideways. But, I mean, besides that, everything we've seen since then is them laughing at Sanji's bounty posters and dancing around and having a good time, right? So I can't imagine being on the Baratier is that bad. It was never bad before, and it really wasn't bad after. So I'm going to put it in A tier. There's a few places on here that I would prefer to live in compared to Baratier, so they're not going to get S, but I think that A tier is a good spot for it. So we've got Dressrosa, and Dressrosa is very similar to Alabasta in the sense that there was sort of this time not a shadow government, but a very open government that was sort of overlording over the people, right, with Doflamingo, and with all of the stuff about being turned into toys and all of that, it is truly much worse than Alabasta in reality, right? You may just like lose your loved one and they get turned into a toy and then you forget about them, and that's just horrible. And with the birdcage, right? I mean, that threatened everybody. It took an admiral and a bunch of other stuff to stop that. What else is there? I mean, Dofi lived like a king, but he didn't treat his people the same way. And afterwards, with Riku and Becca, it's better now, but I would prefer to live in Alabasta post, Straw Hat intervention. And I would prefer to live in Alabasta at both times, right? Pre and post, compared to pre and post of Dressrosa. And for that, I think I'm going to put Dressrosa in C tier. Maybe, yeah, probably like low C tier, right? Because it's not good, right? Most of the time it's not good. After Straw Hat intervention, it gets better. It seems like it's like becoming a nicer and nicer place. And of course it's beautiful, but it's just the before that was so intense and brutal that would really make me not want to live there. So Dressrosa, C tier. Some people would probably put that higher, but it is what it is, right? So Drum Island is a curious case, right? Because I really like the vibe of Drum Island. I know it's freezing cold, but beforehand, Wapple held himself up in the castle and he didn't care about his people. With that being said, though, I can't think of any times that the only thing that he ever did was prevent people from getting medical care, which is a huge thing, obviously. But he was not turning people into toys. He was not, enslaving people. He wasn't doing any of that. He held up in the castle with all of his doctors, and that was like his shitty little plan, right? And afterwards, after the Straw Hats boot out Wapol, I feel like Drum Island is like a really nice kind of low key place to be, right? In the early Grand Line, just kind of vibing. And I don't think I would hate it, right? It seems like there's a lot of wildlife, like the big bunny rabbits that you kind of have to be scared of. But, with Dalton as the king, or the chief, whatever you want to call him, of the village. And it just kind of seems like it would be not that bad, I'm going to be honest. And it wasn't too bad before. So I think I'm going to put it in C tier as well, but above these, right? I think that's a good spot for it, just because of the sort of, it's like low stakes is how I would describe it in both instances. And, as long as you can handle the cold, I don't think it would be that bad, right? Okay, so I've got a couple controversial ones here, but I'm going to explain my reasoning. Enies Lobby is one that you might think is going to be really low, but the truth about it is, if you're living in Enies Lobby, well, did they have families? Could they have families if they were stationed in Enies Lobby? I don't think we ever saw that. In Marineford, we did, right? But in Enies Lobby, you're kind of way out there, and you're in that very hostile sort of environment with the waterfall. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you live in Enies Lobby, you're a Marine, right? You are a guard of Enies Lobby, or you're just stationed there, right? And the life of a lowly Marine, barring some insane force coming to get you, doesn't really seem that bad. You know what I mean? Only when you rise through the ranks do you really start to witness the atrocities, I feel, of the government's actually producing. So if you're just some seaman recruit or whatever, you might just have kind of a nice life on Enies Lobby doing your thing. But I feel like there was a lot of destruction of buildings, and we never really saw any families of the Marines there, did we? I could be wrong about that, but I'm going to assume because of that, and because Marineford explicitly states that you do have families there, I'm going to say that Enies Lobby is you can't have them there when you're stationed there. And for that, I'm going to have to drop it down a bit. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments about this, but I'm inferring from what I remember from the show. So, with all those things being said, with that long-winded sort of back and forth with myself, I think Enies Lobby wouldn't be that bad, but I also don't think it would be amazing. Because, barring the Straw Hats coming and blowing that shit up, and even when they do blow that shit up, if you survive, you probably just get transferred to somewhere where you can have a family, right? Maybe I'm reading too much into all that, but I'm going to put it there. I think that's fine. It's not great, but it's not horrible. So, Fishman Island is a crazy one, right? Because you have Hody Jones, and mostly Hody Jones, but Vanderdecken's being a little bit of a shit too. And, you're obviously not looked at anywhere else in the world, if you're a fishman, as equal. You're considered lower. But I must say that the general, populace of Fishman Island, those who weren't with Hody, it seemed all right, with Papag and his clothing store, right? I feel like if you can have a luxury, open your own luxury clothing brand and have an outlet for it somewhere, it doesn't really seem that bad. And it's one of the most beautiful places in the whole verse, right? It's just amazing, the views. And I'm assuming that you'd be a fishman, right? Because being a human is very impractical here. But assuming that you are a fishman and that you grew up here, and you saw the whole Hody Jones thing, and you saw what Fisher Tiger did and Otohime and all that, right? You went through a lot, right? You experienced a lot of struggle, or you at least witnessed a lot of struggle. And now Big Mom's got you, right? And they're demanding all the sweets and stuff, but is that really so bad? I think it's not great, but I don't really think it's awful either. And then the Straw Hats come in and they take over. And being under Luffy's control, it's got to be good, right? That's like being under Whitebeard's control. They don't do the tributes like Shanks, Maybe Whitebeard did, I don't know. They don't do the tribute system and all that business. I think I'm going to do like here. We're really stacking C tier, right? I think it's because there's a lot of islands that have pros and cons, right? And that's what all 5 of those represent, right? Maybe Amazon Lily to the most extreme degree, but all right, cool. So if you're living in Impel Down, the probability says that you're a prisoner. And in a prison with no terms, no sentence lengths, and constant torture, and torture unimaginable to our world, right? It's literally an analogy for the 7, or metaphor, whatever, for the 7 layers of hell. And for that, I think it makes it easily the worst on the whole list, right? Yeah, obviously. So there's some pretty bad ones, but nothing's as bad as this, because if you're a prisoner here, which is 95, maybe 90% of the people that are living here, quote unquote, it's beyond hell on earth for you, right? I think a lot of these people wish they were dead. So, and they probably, a lot of them probably do succumb, but it's just horrible. It's just horrible. And even if you are a guard, you have to witness that, and, you have to be around Hannibal, right? Like, is that really something that you want? I don't think so. So, yeah, obviously the worst one, right? Okay. So we've got Little Garden, and you may expect me to put this in F tier, and I wouldn't be surprised if you did. But what I will say is that, so there's 2 giants, and they're fighting, right? Big Dory, Big Broggy are duking it out. There's big dinosaurs and all that, right? You obviously would have a really hard time surviving here. And there's horrible disease, right? What I will say, though, is that, well, no, okay. It is horrible, right? It actually is. I was thinking about putting in D tier. It actually is horrible because of the disease, because of the giant dinosaurs. If you're just a normal person, you're going to die very quickly. And I think for that, it makes it probably maybe the second worst of all of these. I just think that it's not at all sort of where you want to be. I was thinking maybe if you had some skills, you could do a survivalist type vibe to it. But even though I am, a big survivalist guy, I couldn't live on Little Garden. So I say that I'm a big survivalist guy, but I'm actually a total noob who wants to become one. But maybe that for another tier list, right? Little Garden, I'm going to say, is just barely better than... Well, it's better than Impel Down for sure, but it's probably not as bad as Arlong Park. Even on Arlong Park, you have to live in subjugation. So... And also when the Straw Hats leave, nothing changes, right? That's the big thing, is it's still going to be screwed up, right? Okay. So we've got Logtown. The town of the beginnings and the end, right? Or is it the city of beginnings and end? The place where Gold Roger was born and executed. And I think that this is absolutely one of the best places that you can live in One Piece. It is in the safest part of the ocean, right? East Blue. And it is close enough to the Red Line and close enough to the action that it's not going to be boring, right? You're still going to hear great stories. I mean, for everything's sake, right? You would have seen Roger's execution and felt the immense aura that he emanated, right? And I hate using that word, but I mean, there's no character in fiction who emanates more than him in that moment. So with Logtown, I just think it would be a very nice place to live. It seems like a really sort of well-established place with, it's got Smoker running it, right, until he left. So maybe a little bit more pirate business after that. But it seems like a really well-developed town, sort of high, economic, you'd be living good if you were a merchant here or whatever, just a tradesman. It seems like it would be a really nice place to live, and for all of the benefits and pretty much no downsides besides maybe some petty pirate interference, it's absolutely going to get an S tier. I think that it is one of the best places to live in One Piece. So Long Ring Longland is kind of like Little Garden if it wasn't so hostile, right? It's very, deserted and very sort of out of the way, right? But I think it's pretty close to Water 7 too, which is honestly a big plus for it. But I think that the fact that it is not nearly as dangerous as Little Garden, I think that this would actually be the place where you could kind of do your survival vibe, right? And there's a lot of like long animals that you could maybe hunt, and I think that like Tanjit, right? I think you could get by pretty good on long ring long land if you had some basic knowledge of self-sustaining practices, right? So I think I'm going to put long ring long land like maybe here. That's probably good. And I think that the obvious downside is that you have no facilities, right? No like established facilities. But with that being said, if you have a boat, how fast did the Straw Hats get there from probably less than a week, right? From Long Ring to Water 7. So if you really needed something, you could get over there probably if you had a boat. But I think that's a good spot for it. We're really stacking the C tier here. Look at this tier list. So Marineford is an interesting one, right? Because it is a fully capable city. It is, very well equipped, it seems, and you're allowed to have families. They mentioned that the families were evacuated before the war, and you see like food stands and stuff. Like it seems like it's like a real, not, it's like a military town, but it's not like a base where you have to surrender all of your freedoms, right? And it seems like it would be a pretty nice place to live, but of course it gets nuked, right? Like that's the issue, is that similar to the next one we're going to do, it was nice living there until something happened, right? And the two places ceased to exist, right? So I think the fact that it is guaranteed that it is not going to exist anymore afterwards, right? Well, Eddie's Lobby is the same though, right? Okay, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to move Eddie's Lobby down because I'm realizing now that, well, you would just get relocated though. I'm kind of conflicted on this idea of like, if it gets destroyed, oh, my webcam's blurring. If it gets destroyed, like how many points does that take off of it, right? Because you obviously like lose your livelihood and stuff. But I also think that the quality of the life you had before is like really important, and also your ability to relocate, right? So I think I'm going to put Annie's Lobby there and maybe Marineford like... No, I'm going to put them both in D tier because you just get your livelihood destroyed, right? And I'm going to put Marineford over Annie's Lobby because it is confirmed in Marineford that you can have families, right? I think that like you can have your like wife and your kids there if you're a Marine. So I'm going to do it like that. I think that's good. So O'Hara is obviously going to be an F tier because you would get genocided if you lived there, right? You may have had a great life with all the knowledge and stuff, but unless you knew about it in advance when the buster call came, you were dead. So I think with a guaranteed death time, that's obviously going to be an F tier. I'm going to put it just above, like that's good, because in Impel Down you just wish you were dead anyway, right? So I think that's good. Okay, so Punk Hazard is, alongside Little Garden, probably the most hazardous environment to actually live in terms of just purely the environment, right? So you have like the ice cold zone and then the magma hot zone, and caused by the Great Battle of Akainu and Aokiji. But I feel like this is also somewhere that you absolutely would never want to live. Like if you're Law and you're cracked, or you're Caesar and you're a psychopath, maybe you would. But I just feel like that this is somewhere that your chance of survival is very little. If you're like a normal or even slightly strong person, you're probably not going to last too long. I think for that, I'm also going to put it in the F tier. Probably like here, maybe? I think that's good. Well, I think with Little Garden, you can maybe at least get some food. Well, there's disease, right? I'm thinking about the disease that Nami got, so I'm going to do that. I think that's probably fair. Okay. So we've got Sabaody Archipelago. And this is maybe the most sort of diverse and complicated one in the whole list, right? Because there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons. So let's start with the pros. Let's start with the cons, actually. So the biggest con, obviously, is that the celestial dragons frequent this zone, and they can basically kill you, steal your girl, right? They can do whatever they want to you, right? And that's not good. That's clearly not a good way to be when you can have your whole life taken away from you at the whim of some inbred, fuck. But something to consider about Sabaody, though. Oh, what are the other negatives first? Big time pirates are going to be coming through to enter the new world, so you might get caught up in some of that action. That might be a positive too, though, if you're kind of like interested in those things, right? And so those are the only real cons, right? I think, and of course that there's slaves and human trading, right? But I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the celestial dragon presence. But there's a lot of gross people who are selling other people. So that's not good, obviously. The pros, though, are the least of which is it's a very beautiful place to be, right? But more so than that, I feel like having the big time pirates around could be very exciting, that you could kind of see what's going on. I think that the fact that it was where Marineford was like Twitch streamed, right? I think that is really cool. I think that the fact that you're right at the red line is sort of like you are, you're in the middle of the action, right? For better or worse. I think that's a pro and a con. But I also think that what am I trying to say? I think that so the celestial dragons like come down the main street, right? They're not going to go to the outskirts. They're not going to go to the like crime districts, right? So as long as you're fine living around some rough and tumble guys, I think that Sabaody could actually be a pretty nice place to live, all things considered. But with strong downsides such as the celestial dragons and the slave auction and stuff, which I think got shut down because Dofi like shut that shit down afterwards because he was not about it, or it wasn't profitable or whatever. I'm going to put Sabaody at the top of C tier. I think that it could be really good, but like it's better than all of these places in terms of like potential living quality, but I also think that it maybe has much stronger downsides than somewhere like Drum or Longring, right? Or even Fishman Island, but I think the potential is there for it to actually be a pretty nice place to live as long as you stay out of the celestial dragon's way, right? Okay, so we've got Skypiea, and Skypiea would be, in my opinion, a lovely place to live, right? You could be a member of the White Berets. You could, live in, I can't remember the name of the town. I'm such a fake fan, but you could live there and kind of do the trading thing, and it seems like a good place to live. And obviously, before the Straw Hats came, Enel was a big problem, but once again, it's kind of like a just don't go over there kind of vibe, right? I mean, obviously he does the Rygo and blows up the whole town. So you're going to have to rebuild from that if you can survive. But I just think that the befores weren't that bad. I mean, they were pretty bad, right? Like not quite Dressrosa bad, not quite, I would say not even quite Alabasta bad, but the afterwards just seems like a really great sort of setup, right? Situation. And for that, I think I'm going to put Skypiea in maybe B tier above Alabasta. I think that's fair. Obviously, you're not really plugged into the world. You don't really know what's going on down below. But with the way the story is going right now, that might actually be a good thing, right? So I think that's a good spot for Skypiea. Oh, my cat's coming to say hello. So, hello. We have a cat. Jeez, you smell. It smells like cat food. I hate that smell. Okay, back to the tier list. So, with Thriller Bark, I feel like something to consider about Thriller Bark is that it's one of the worst places to live, right? Because if you live there, it means that you're like a subject of Moria and he's like stolen your shadow and there is no freedom there, right? So, and what becomes of it afterwards is like kind of, I think they just abandon it, right? Or what happens to Thriller Bark? I can't even remember. I hate that arc, right? I'm not a fan. So I just feel like Thriller Bark is absolutely one of the worst places to live because to live there is to be subjugated by a phallus onion head man, right? So that's probably not the best. I feel like that's just not the best, right? That's just not, of all the places on this list, that's probably not where you want to live. And I think it's probably gonna go like here. I mean, you're living in constant fear. You're living in constant fear of Moria and his cronies. I mean, if you're a woman and hogback gets a hold of you, I'd rather be an impel down, right? So I'm going to put Thriller Bark there. Wano is alongside, alongside Sabaody, Wano is a very curious case, right? Because it is so bad before the Straw Hats get there, but it is so good after, right? I feel like Wano is shaping up. It's curious to say, right? Because is Blackbeard going to invade, right? You know what I mean? Like, is that still coming? I feel like that might still be coming. But barring that, I feel like after, the siege and everything, the raid, it really does just become one of the most fantastic places to live. And they seem like they're rebuilding really well. Like with the cover story and stuff, we're seeing a lot of like really good sort of progress being made like super duper quickly. But with that being said, the beforehand was just so bad, right? People were starving. The water was polluted. Kaido was hoarding all of the resources in Onigashima. You would potentially have to eat a smile fruit. Like, there's just so many like horrible things that can happen to you. It really stops Wano from being ranked very highly. I think I'm going to put Wano, just for how good it is afterwards, I'm going to put it like, if it didn't seem like it was going so well, it would be lower, but it's so beautiful, right? Like, it really is like amazing. Well, so if you were like on Onigashima and you were in Kaido's crew, maybe that wouldn't have been so bad because Kaido was like hoarding all the resources and you were kind of benefiting from that. But once the raid happened, I mean, it was just game over, right? Wano is so curious. I don't really know where to put it. I think C tier is probably the right place to put it. I'm going to say like, maybe like, I'm going to put it, oh man. Let's do that. I feel like that's right. Yeah, I'm going to say that. I feel like, oh shit. I feel like, the amount of negatives, the amount of like stuff that you would have had to go through from living there is just it's so bad, right? Kaido was really one of the worst dictators of an island in this series. Okay, so we've made it to my top pick for where I would want to live in One Piece. We've made it to Water 7. It's no surprise that Water 7 is my favorite arc in the series, and I think that this place would be wonderful to live in, right? Maybe when you were young, it was like down on its luck and people were like kind of like in poverty. But when Iceberg and Tom and then Iceberg came along, Tom freaking brought that place up from the depths, right? Made the train, turned it into like this shipbuilding hub for the world. And I always say that if I was in One Piece, I would want to be a shipbuilder on Water 7. That just seems like a really chill kind of, vibe. Obviously, you have Aqua Laguna, right? But I mean, the people there just don't even seem to think that that's like that big of a deal. It's like comes around once a year, once or twice a year. All right, kids, come on, let's go to the shelter and handle that, and then move on with our like really nice, peaceful lives in a well-developed city with access to healthcare and all of this stuff that it just makes it seem like such a nice place. And it's pretty close to the marine zone, right? The marine sort of sphere of influence. But once again, if you're just a normal dude, it doesn't really seem that bad. And if you work for Galley Law, I'm sure they pay really well. It seems like the right place to be, in my opinion, of any of these places in this whole series. So absolutely S tier. You can take the train to Pucci and San Faldo. Oh, it seems lovely, right? It just seems like where you want to be. So we got Whiskey Peak. And if you live on Whiskey Peak, you are a scrub of Baroque works, right? I think all of the people that were living there I think so. And I think Mr. Nine and Miss Monday like live there now. Like the cover story made it look like that they were still there, right? Like sitting on the side of the building. But pet my cat. I feel like overall this is like probably not where you want to live. Overall, look at him, he's freaking out because I'm scratching him. Ooh. But I feel like Whiskey Peak is just somewhere that you probably don't want to live because you'd be a bounty hunter and then Zoro would kill you, right? If you live there afterwards with Mr. Nine and Miss Monday, it wouldn't be that bad. But with that being said, the main purpose of living there is what I just mentioned, bounty hunter killed by Zorro. I'm going to put Whiskey Peak maybe above these two, but in D tier, because the before wouldn't have been like too terrible, but the afterwards is like almost certain death unless Zorro like chooses to spare you, like he did with that like kid and that nun lady, right? So I'm gonna put it in D tier. I think that's a good spot for it. We got Whole Cake Island. Now this is another really, really curious one, right? Because you're certainly in a authoritarian state. You are certainly, under constant threat of getting eaten by a giant monster woman. But I think that the sort of grand negatives are counteracted at least a bit by the fact that it is one of the most wealthy empires in the whole series, right? And if you are like, if you are a common man or a merchant here, you probably do pretty well for yourself. I mean, at the tea party, Big Mom invited all of the underworld, like, trade bosses and stuff. And it seems like it would be somewhere that could be a really bad time, but could also be not that bad of a time. I feel like, maybe if you're, like, living on Katakuri's Island or whatever, like, it wouldn't be that bad. I mean, he's still pretty scary, but I don't think it would be too horrible. I think I'm going to put it maybe, like, I don't know. Maybe like higher than all these. What am I saying? Maybe like, is that right? No. Yeah, maybe like that. And, with Big Mom defeated now, I think that it's going to get a lot better. It hasn't yet, right? Because Blackbeard came and took Pudding, and I guess Aokiji did, took Pudding. But I feel like this is somewhere that it wouldn't be that bad, right? It really wouldn't be that bad. I think that's a good spot for it. This tier list obviously shows you that you would maybe not want to live in the One Piece world. Well, these are all Grand Line islands, though, right? You don't want to live in the Grand Line unless it's Water 7. So let's move on. And that's just even more props to Water 7 that it seems that chill despite it being in the Grand Line. Everybody needs boats in One Piece, so that's why it stays chill. It's kind of like Switzerland, right? Okay, so we've got Zoe. Now, Zoe is on the back of a giant elephant. And with that, you're never going to have to worry about the Marines. And you get to be a cool, like, furry person, right? You get to be a mink. I think that Zoe, besides Jack's siege, that's the only bad thing that's happened to Zoe, right? We haven't had any, like, big players show up and try to, like, do anything else, right? So, and there is a poneglyph hidden there, so it's like they might want to, but they don't know about it. I feel like Zoe is somewhere that would not be bad at all to live. I think that you're so isolated, but you have such a strong civilization as well that you really wouldn't have to worry that much. And I think for that, I'm going to put Zoe in A tier because the siege was the only bad part, and it lasted, a week, right? Whereas, like, Skypiea and Alabasta and Wano and Dressrosa, these things lasted years, right? With these people who were being subjugated. But Jack was there for a week. He released the gas, right? Just like run off into the woods and then come back. You'll be fine. So I think Zoe is somewhere that I would really like to live. You get to be a mink. That'd be cool. But not quite as good as Baratier, just because Baratier was always so chill, right? Like, you get that one crazy day with Mihawk and Don Krieg, but other than that, Baratier is sick. And finally, we have the Germa Kingdom, which is sort of at least in my opinion, sort of an even worse Whole Cake Island, where you're clearly living under this, like, very authoritarian regime, and I don't really know if I have much to say about it. I feel like just living under Judge would be, like, really bad, and there'd be a lot of, like, horrible policies that would, like, restrict your freedom and stuff. They don't really get into it too much. Can't remember, right? But with all the experiments and stuff, and it's just, I cannot imagine wanting to live here. It seems like it would be pretty horrible, actually. Not quite as bad as a lot of these, but still pretty bad. I'm going to put it in D tier, top of D tier. Maybe like this. I think that's probably good. Okay, so another kind of short one, right? This is like going to go like 40 minutes, but definitely a little bit longer than last week. So this is the tier list. As you can see, living in the Grand Line is probably not the best choice for an average Joe like myself, but there are still some gems, and there are nice places in the rest of the world to live, right? Like in the calm seas, the calm four seas of the blue, all right? But I think this is it. So obviously Water 7 is my number one. Logtown I think would be excellent. Logtown, Baratier, Arlong Park are the only three that are in East Blue, right? So obviously those are a little bit better, but Arlong Park not so much. And I think this is good. Obviously a very bottom heavy tier list, but I'm rambling at this point. So thanks for watching. Please come back next week for another Tier List Tuesday, and catch you later.